Welcome to part 3 of my video security systems. This video's topic will be installation considerations for camera resolutions. By far the most common question I receive is, can I recognize faces with my cameras? To answer this question, I'm going to take a few minutes to explain to you how cameras actually draw a person's face. This will affect the way you install your cameras. Cameras create images by using lots and lots of little dots, called pixels. The more pixels you use, the easier it is to recognize what you're looking at. Another very important factor is how many pixels were used to draw the face when compared to the total number of pixels in the screen that you're looking at. For example, this face is 64 pixels wide, and the screen that it's being displayed on is 190 pixels wide. So this face-to-screen ratio is 33%. A general rule of thumb, if you want to recognize the face of a complete stranger, that face should occupy at least 30% of the display screen. For those of you that like fractions, that's about a third of the screen should be used by the face. This will ensure that there's enough pixels in the face to provide the detail to make it recognizable. Okay, what does the position of my camera have anything to do with this? Let's say I mount a camera on top of my garage and point it down the driveway. The camera's going to record everything that's within a preset angle in front of it. You'll find this angle in the specifications for the camera. For example, this one's 75 degrees. This viewing angle is very important. We'll be coming back to this again later. Now, let's measure the distance away from our camera. That distance determines how wide of an area our camera is looking at. In this example, 10 feet away from the camera, the image we're recording is 20 feet wide. 20 feet from the camera, the image we're recording is 40 feet wide, and so on. The camera we're using is a pretty good camera, so it can record 1,000 pixels across. We'd like to know how many pixels is used to draw each foot of the image you're looking at. To figure this out, we divide the total number of pixels by the area we're viewing, which is 20 feet in this case. That means there will be 50 pixels per foot. Now, the average human head is roughly 1 foot wide. So your camera will be using 50 pixels or dots to try to represent that person's face when they're standing 10 feet away from the camera. Let's do the math all the way out to 40 feet. At 40 feet, the camera's trying to represent every foot with only 12 pixels. About the only thing 12 pixels will show you is that the person has a head and maybe a nose. You can pretty much forget trying to figure out what color their eyes are. Here's a chart that shows how your pixel count affects the clarity of your picture. On the left is 1 by 1 pixels, and on the right is 50 by 50 pixels. So if the person's 40 feet from the camera, their face will look somewhat like this blurry letter R. As they move closer, more pixels are used to draw their face, which results in a clearer image. Knowing this information, it seems there's at least 3 different ways we can improve the visibility of a person's face. The first is to try to get them to be closer to the camera. This only works in a controlled environment like in hallways and such. The second is to pick a camera that has a narrower field of view. For example, say the person's standing way out here. If your camera's field of view is adjustable, this is often called the zoom capability, or you just purchase a camera with a narrower field of view, then the recording width is considerably shorter, leaving more pixels for the person's face. But here's the drawback. You can clearly see the person's face, but now you can only see half of your driveway. You want to see the whole driveway? Go with a wider angle of view. Now you see the whole driveway, but not the person's face clearly. This is how I solved the problem. I mounted a camera on each side of the house, and a third camera right in the middle. The 2 side cameras each have a narrow angle of view. This gives me an awful lot of detail for half of the property. Then the camera in the middle is a wide-angle lens. I can't see a lot of detail, but I can see the entire yard. So the middle camera is displayed on my monitor. If something looks funny or needs to be looked at closer, the high-detailed cameras on each side is recorded on your DVR. Simply go back and look at that footage to get the information you want. And finally, the third way to increase your facial recognition is install cameras with a higher resolution. In this example, our camera had 1,000 pixel resolution. Installing a camera capable of recording 2,000 pixels will greatly enhance your ability to see a person's face at a much longer distance. Okay, where to start when you're trying to explain camera resolution? Let's start with names. When you're buying either DVRs, NVRs, or cameras, advertising will use these acronyms to describe what you're purchasing. Additionally, when you're trying to set up the resolution on your recorder, they again use these acronyms. So knowing this stuff will probably make your life a lot easier. Like, should I use D1 or SIF? I'll tell you now, if you choose the wrong one, you won't be happy. Before we talk about resolution formats, I have to tell you another story. Remember when you rented a DVD from the video store and it wouldn't work on your computer because it was formatted for the wrong country? Well, these two items right here is what caused that problem. Different countries throughout the world handle analog video signals differently. So now that you're getting involved in video, you have to know what country you live in. NTSC is used in the United States of America and Canada, PAL, Western Europe and Australia, and CCAM in Eastern Europe and France. But there's rumors on the internet that CCAM's going away and Eastern Europe and France will be using PAL from here on out, or at least pretty soon. So you have to buy the correct equipment for the country you live in. This is really a lot easier than it sounds though. If you purchase your equipment in a brick and mortar store, they will normally sell the correct format for the country that they're selling in. And if you purchase your equipment over the internet, many companies will automatically ship the correct equipment based on the country the order came from. However, you should always check the camera or recorder specification sheet to verify you're buying the correct piece of equipment. Here we see this particular camera is capable of recording in either format. You simply tell it which one to use. The most common analog video format is CIF, Common Intermediate Format or Interchange Format. Its resolution in NTSC is only 352 by 240. It's equivalent to about a 1990s era cell phone screen. Please notice that the number of pixels for the PAL system is considerably different than the NTSC system. When you're setting up your DVR's record resolution, you'll notice CIF is usually on the list. The reason is that the resolution is so low, you can get a lot of record time. And low resolution means you won't recognize faces. So I never use CIF. Oh, and a heads up. To meet their advertising claims for long record times, some companies automatically set this up as the default. If you're using a high-resolution camera, it'll look great real time on the screen. But if you go back and try to look at the recording, you'll see that CIF threw out most of the resolution and just recorded the basics. I strongly recommend you get rid of the CIF record resolution. In this case, I would select D1. D1's resolution is actually 720 by 480. It's the maximum resolution for conventional analog recording. There is one caveat here. For reasons I don't understand, many recorders will crop the horizontal scan lines from 720 down to 704. Take a look at your user's manual to see if you have full D1 or a cropped D1. Now, this higher resolution will eat up more of your hard drive, but that shouldn't matter since most recorders just automatically re-record over the oldest data. The other entry on this recorder is HD1. The H means half, so horizontal resolution will be half of what D1 is. If you see the number 2, that means twice. So with 2 CIF, the horizontal resolution is twice what CIF is. 4 means 4 times. Both the horizontal and the vertical resolution will be twice that of a normal CIF. Here's an interesting fact. The resolution of 4CIF and D1 are exactly the same. If I had to guess, I'd say they changed the name to D1 for advertising purposes. And the last standard analog format is QCIF. Q means quarter, so both horizontal and vertical is cut in half. Okay, VGA isn't actually a recording format. It's the resolution of many of the older computer monitors. So I included it as a reference. The entries above VGA look worse, the entries below look better. Finally, the Sony Corporation decided they had to go above and beyond standard. They created 960H. If you look at the pixels, it's basically a widescreen D1. It is analog, but not standard analog. Now that we've covered DVR recording formats, let's tie this into buying the correct camera for the format that you're recording in. Analog cameras aren't rated in pixels. They're actually rated in something called TVL, or television lines. There really isn't a direct correlation between TVL and pixels, but in my research I found some close approximations of how they should actually relate. An inexpensive camera that's 420 TVL is roughly 510 by 492 pixels. Matching your camera resolution to your recording resolution, if you're recording HD1, this is the camera you'd want. If you bought a more expensive camera with a higher TVL, you're just wasting money because you can't record that extra resolution. If you're recording at 2 CIF, you want a 540 TVL camera. Oh, as a general note, expect any camera under 500 TVL to have a blurry image. If you're recording in D1, you'll want a camera that runs 600 TVL. Finally, the best camera for 960H is 700 TVL. I would stay away from any standard analog cameras that advertise more than 700 TVL. The reason for this is, a standard coax cable, you can't push more than 720 TVL across. So you'd be paying for resolution you can't use. Now remember, I said standard analog. There are actually some specialty analog systems that you can push more than 720 through the cable on. I'll mention those at the end of this video. All of these analog systems use coax to route their video. If you're on a budget, these are the cheapest systems on the market. But if you'd like a higher resolution than 960 by 480, you can go to digital. When running digital video, you replace the coax cable with Cat5 or Cat6 network cable. The lowest digital resolution is called 720p. The good news is, digital, you don't have to worry about NTSC or PAL. All digital is the same and is based on two items: the number of pixels you're displaying, in this case 1280 by 720, and the aspect ratio. Aspect ratio describes how the video displays on your monitor. Aspect ratio is calculated by dividing the horizontal pixels by the vertical pixels, then reducing. This will give you a fraction, for example 16 by 9. I'm sure you've heard of 16 by 9 before. In television, it's called theater mode. It's where you get the black bars across the top and the bottom of the screen. Picture is wider than it is tall. Moving up in resolution, you've got 1.3 megapixel, 2 megapixel, one that anyone who's ever shopped for a new TV knows, 1080p high def, but there's a gotcha with this 1080p. There's a 1080p SD out there, which stands for standard definition. It has fewer pixels than a high definition 1080p. This is because its aspect ratio is 4:3, which means it's designed to be displayed on computer monitors. The high def is designed to be displayed on televisions. Next, you have 2.3 megapixel, and finally 3 megapixel. They actually do have higher resolutions, but they're designed mostly for commercial use. Finally, remember I said there were some specialized analog systems out there? As far as resolution goes, they would be located right here on our table. If you own any of these analog systems that are listed, and you're unhappy with them, you can throw your current cameras away as well as your current DVR, keep your existing video cables in place, then install new cameras and DVR from these specialty systems. This will upgrade your resolution to high definition. There are currently 4 different vendors offering this. But like the days of the old where you VHS versus the Betamax, none of these technologies are interchangeable. So if you buy one, you have to stick with it. For example, if you buy HD CVI, from that point on, only HD CVI cameras can be purchased. I've listed each of the technologies' resolutions that are available, and these are complicated enough. I'll cover these in a different video. Wow, there's a lot of information here. Let me see if I can find a way of simplifying it. How about a picture showing the top 5 used resolutions and how they compare? If your standard SIP picture is this large, then D1 is considerably larger. 960H is simply widescreen D1. Then you have 720p. Then everybody's favorite, 1080p. I'd like to cover just a couple more facts about resolution. Another use you can make out of this chart is this pixel list. You want to make sure the display you're using is set at or as close to these pixels as you can get. If it's not, the image on your screen will be distorted. I can tell you from many years of experience, this is not what my driveway really looks like. The next thing you need to know is that the resolutions will be different depending on which port you're viewing your image on. A monitor hooked up to one of your output graphics ports will show you the full resolution of the cameras. If you're outputting your video over the Ethernet port, whether it be to view on your computer or to be sent to your cell phone, many recorders will reduce the resolution in order to save bandwidth. Usually you have the ability to hook up a memory stick to the USB port. You can then save your images as a video file that any computer can read without special software. But this conversion will result in a significant resolution loss. And finally, the image that will be saved on the recorder will be at the level you selected when you set up your recorder. Let's sum all this up. In the past, I've owned pretty much all of the budget cameras, SIF, D1, 960H, but the old rule applied. You get what you pay for. All my video images look like the top picture. Recently, I finally threw all that stuff away and bought a 1080p. Now I'm looking at stuff like the bottom picture shows. So if you can afford it, take a serious look at the higher resolution cameras. Well, that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching.